What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a few hand histories from the early stages of tournaments to help you guys learn how to build a big stack. We are going to be joined by the newest member of Team Upswing, Pratyush Buddiga. Now, Pratyush has some pretty impressive tournament results. In fact, he's cashed for over $5.3 million. Oh, wait, shit, he just passed me. What the hell? Pratyush does have an impressive resume in tournaments, with his biggest score being over 800k in Macau, and he took down a 25k high roller last year for almost $800,000. I've had the honor of working with Pratyush a lot in the last few years, and while he has a very good theoretical approach to the game, he also has solid reads on the way that the player pool plays, as well as a lot of reg-specific reads, so that makes him a fierce player in a lot of these tournaments. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this video with Pratyush, and keep in mind a couple of the hands were blocked by the webcam, but our opponents had us covered in at least the first one, so you know what the relevant stack size is. And we're going to go ahead and jump into our first hand. We're going to look at my hands first, and then we're going to get into Pratt's, but I got a few hands selected here, and thanks for coming over to help out here on the channel.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm looking forward to looking at these hands.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. So here we have my fourth favorite hand, pocket jacks, and action folds to a mid position player who decides to open. So let's just go ahead and start off by talking about some of the differences here between playing in a non-ante game versus an ante game. And what are you looking to change here in your pre-flop strategy with that in mind?
I'm definitely playing a lot tighter. There's not as many chips out there to be won. So I'm definitely just three betting and flatting a smaller range versus an open. Then if we had antes, where I'd be more incentivized to try to, fight for the pot.
So how does that manifest itself? What hands would you consider three betting here? Or I guess it's really the other way, because we're going to be playing tighter. What are some of the kinds of hands you're looking to, maybe flat or fold here that you would consider three betting in a game with antes? Or, once the tournament has antes?
I think some of the hands like a 9-7 suited, an 8-6 suited, some of the lower suited connectors like 6-5 suited, I would definitely start folding these with when it's pre-ante. But if there was antes, I'd definitely be, looking to maybe three bet it and, try to either win the pot pre-flop or, have an interesting post-flop situation.
Yeah, it makes some sense. It's also worth noting that, knocking the blinds out, especially the big blind, has a lot of value. And more so when there is an ante, because I assume the big blind's defense is going to go up substantially once there is an ante involved. So here I assume we're going to go ahead and three bet jacks. I've highlighted some of the interesting ones. Don't know the exact action or hole cards, so we're all in for a little bit of a treat there. But we three bet jacks and get a call. So this looks pretty standard. Ace, 9, 7, and he checks. What are you doing here? What are your thoughts?
I'm definitely checking. I don't think we need to worry about equity denial too much here. I think jacks isn't a hand we want to go for three streets. So I'm definitely just going ahead and checking and planning to play bluff catcher. What about you?
Yeah, I think I lean toward to check too, but there is certainly a discussion to be had with the over pairs in our range. I think it's pretty fair to say that we can have tens through kings here pretty much always.
Right.
Maybe looking to flat tens pre versus some tighter players, but certainly jacks, queens, and kings always, probably tens always as well. So, we kind of have to classify these pairs in different ways. And there's a huge difference to me between tens without a spade and kings with a spade. Kings
Right.
with a spade is just I think a mandatory check. I see basically no real merit in betting at all. There's not really any really bad turns for you. I mean, I'm not saying you're happy if the turn's like an offsuit 10 or an offsuit 8. But there's really no super amazing turns for you. And there's really no super bad turns for you. Whereas let's say you have a tens with no spade. In that situation, going for more of an equity denial approach could make some sense. Well, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Just the lower down we get, the more equity denial we have when there's more overcards that he could potentially hit. I think jacks with a spade is definitely closer to a check. I think, like you said, jacks and tens without a spade could be a bet, and you still get some value from a 9 or even potentially some 8-7 suited or 7-6 suited type hand. So there is definitely some value to be had. So there's definitely some merit to betting.
Okay, cool. So I believe this is going to go check, check, and it does. And we get a deuce, and we face check again. So what's your thoughts here, I guess with jacks, but also like in general, how are you going to be structuring your range as far as trying to balance out your bluffs and value bets here on the turn?
I think for value bets, I'm gonna definitely start value betting any ace that I might have checked back on the flop. So some of the low suited aces that we would have three bet, and maybe like an ace 10 off, I maybe check for some balance on the flop as well. So that would be my value bets, and then my bluffs would be hands that I didn't really think I could barrel too many turns and rivers with. So potentially like a queen jack of diamonds or something. Maybe if I, three bet that pre-flop and was like, oh, I'd rather delay and start bluffing the turn. I think that hand would make sense. Just any hand that I like that has maybe didn't have any a real backdoor equity on the flop that, needs to start bluffing at some point. I think those types of hands would make sense on the turn.
Okay, so we're definitely going to be going for some value with all of the ace X that traps the flop. But what are you doing with some of these pairs? Because I think we're going to have a lot more hands like kings, queens, jacks than we are going to have ace X. I mean, yeah, when we have top pair, it's pretty sweet. But we have a lot of other hands here that realistically are pretty far ahead of our opponent. I guess it's debatable how far ahead they would be with two suites of betting. But given if we think about the pre-flop flat range for the opener, and then flop going check, check, him electing to check the turn, he might occasionally trap a few aces, but, especially in the non-ante portion of the tournament, kind of hard to imagine him having an ace unless it's like maybe a hand like ace 10 suited or something. So what are your thoughts here? You're going to bet any of those pairs on the turn?
I generally don't, but I can definitely see the merit for it. I think that especially a hand like jacks or tens, which, can get some value on the turn and maybe needs a little more protection than a hand like kings, which can basically play well across all rivers. I could definitely see some merit for, betting it on the turn. I generally check a lot in these spots. That definitely could be a league of mine, but I think there's definitely a lot of value to be had especially if we think that he's checking ace 10, if he's betting any ace on the turn.
Okay, cool. Yeah, seems pretty close. I can kind of get behind either way. One of the reasons that I do lean towards check is, if you go bet, how many hands can you really expect to get value from? It's also worth noting, like, there's definitely a difference here between tens, jacks, and queens. When we're this deep pre-flop, I'd probably expect a 4-bet with queens, but I wouldn't be the most shocked ever if I saw a flat. But tens, I think, is certainly flatting the 3-bet. And jacks most likely is too, depending on the way that this player wants to play it. So it could be a spot where, maybe you look to delay with some hands like kings. And
I think most people would flat queens in this spot in tournaments. Like, there's definitely some people would 4-bet get it in, but I think this deep, I think most people are going for the flat. So I think there's a pretty big difference between kings and jacks and tens here. So
I'm gonna trust your reads on what tournament players are doing because I feel
there's very few. I think unless there's the famous tournament player dynamics history or whatever, I don't think most people are 4-betting queens here. So
all right,
especially.
Okay, cool. So check, and we get a queen river, and our opponent bets 800. So I guess my first question is, how are you constructing your call range, and then after that, how are you playing your raises?
I guess I'm definitely calling kings. If I check back an ace on the turn, which I might check back an ace 3 suited, I would call that. But obviously that's not. There's not too many combos.
Also, not to mention that pre-flop with non-ante, I assume you're 3-betting them a little less aggressively as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would still go for the wheel aces, but I think I wouldn't be 3-betting like an ace 6 or ace 8 or anything like that. So it's definitely a much it's a pretty rare spot where you can happily snap call with an ace here. So I think you definitely got to call kings. We do have queens here, which is nice, obviously, for our raising. But I don't know. I don't think I would be calling jacks here. I think it just doesn't seem like we're gonna be good enough quite often enough here.
Yeah, I think if you have a hand like kings or king queen, you have to call. I think that there is a chance that our opponent, realistically, is representing a queen here. He can have some weaker aces, but I have to imagine a lot of the hands that are betting this spot are a hand like king queen suited, maybe queen jack
Mhm.
suited, depending on how thin he's looking to go.
Yeah.
But really, he's representing like weak ace, strong queen. So whenever you have a hand that can beat some of the value bets, you just have a snap call, obviously. And then we can obviously have a hand like king queen ourselves. Not too likely for us to have queen jack.
Yeah. Yeah. Not super. I think Queen Jack we'd probably have started bluffing the turn maybe, but that's just me.
Queen jack makes sense as a good turn bluff. When you improve to a queen or a jack, you can usually value bet,
Mhm.
reasonable removal, and then obviously like if you get hands like sixes to fold, pretty big win for queen jack. So
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can definitely have kings. We definitely have king queen. Definitely have queens. Um, what do you think about calling a hand like jacks here versus calling a hand like 10-9 suited?
Um, I mean, I guess the thing with 10-9 suited is we block like Queen 9 suited and so like the rare value bets that he got there on the river with. So it might be a little bit better than of a call than jacks, but yeah.
Yeah, it seems pretty close. I think in general, in a lot of these check down to the river spots where there's not like relevant suits, I mean, yeah, we have a spade, right? And there was a spade draw on the flop. Not really the most relevant.
Yeah,
Uh,
because a lot of his spades bet the turn anyway.
yeah,
So
exactly. I think I'm anticipating those hands to mainly bet turns. So, in a lot of these situations where suits aren't that relevant, I think I generally lean towards going for a more linear approach,
same, yeah.
and calling with my stronger hands, folding my weaker ones, and then raising my good hands and uh, my kind of middle hands between call and fold. So, what do you think about this hand as a hand to bluff with, and what do you think as far as size goes?
I think if we're calling king queen when we have it and we want to fold below that, obviously this makes sense because it's the next hand down. So yeah, I'm down with that. If we were going to call jacks or tens, obviously we would raise our best nine that we could have. So yeah, I'm definitely down for a raise here because I don't think we're going to be good often enough to call here.
Yeah, I think it's close. I can see some kind of merit both ways. I think there's a few um, hands I'm also going to fold, like King Jack, or maybe 8-7 suited or 10-9 suited.
Hmm.
So if you're also then going to fold tens or jacks, maybe you're over folding, which could be a problem. But I also think it might be a better hand to call with a hand like 10-9 or 9-8 than a hand
Hmm.
like jacks in terms of removal. I'm not sure. I'm not totally sure, but I think we kind of want our opponent to have a hand like King Jack, or maybe Jack 10 that decided to just play conservatively on the turn and give up.
Sure.
Um, so I mean, maybe this hand just makes sense as a fold though. Kind of talking myself out of it, but we
Yeah.
go ahead here and go for the all in. So. What do you think about the size here? How are you balancing this? What are we representing for value? And yeah.
I mean, I think we're representing queens or a slow play to aces, right? So I don't think we have any other value bets really besides those two hands. So I think definitely makes sense to go all in when we just have like we're representing top set or second set on this board. So I think sizing makes a lot of sense.
You do have to be very careful here though, because you're gonna have three combos of queens, and you,
Yeah,
you might have one or two combos of aces depending on the way that you're gonna play that in the flop and the turn. Um, but
yeah.
let's
I
say
think eight.
our opponent has a hand like king queen. We're
Mhm.
down to one combo of queens. So
Yeah,
if we're gonna be making this play, we have to be very confident in this being the hand that we're going to want to use. But then you also have to like only do it with a hand like Jack's part of the time. Because if you're just like, oh, Jacks are worse than the next hand I want to call, gonna rip it in. That's six
yeah.
combos,
You have way too many bluffs there.
way too many bluffs. So yeah, I like this play looking back on it. Although I'm being a little bit results oriented, except I'm not because it did not get through. So Ace 10, a hand that we definitely could see here. I imagine my image not helping me in playing whatever tournament I'm playing in.
Yeah, I think you're like the only person who gets called here. Like, I think this is one of those where you can try this at home because it's gonna work for you, but it's not gonna work for Doug. Like,
Definitely a worthwhile opinion, but I still strive for the balance, even though
yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah. No, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but a lot of times in like videos and stuff when they're teaching someone, you say don't try this at home, but I say definitely try this at home. And if you have, as long as you don't have Doug's image, which most of you probably don't. So.
It really is. I always say this: you got to nerf bluffing. Bluffing's just too strong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what do you think about his call? So, I mean, for starters, like, I think we can agree King Queen is a much better call than Ace 10, in terms of just like what you're blocking. When I jam here, he can mainly fold. So I don't know. I'm not totally sure what I feel about this because if he calls King Queen suited, and let's just say he's gonna bet a hand like Ace Queen or Ace Jack suited on the turn.
Yeah, I would assume.
Maybe he's kind of close to having enough calls with just King Queen. I don't mind adding Ace 10 in, but
Yeah.
it's definitely important to note here your removal against the range of hands that your opponent's representing. And so sometimes, yeah, second pair would be a better hand to call with than top pair.
For sure. He also has to bet King Queen. Like I definitely see a lot of tournament players check a Queen here. So he might just think that he doesn't have any better hands than Ace 10 because he would bet Ace Jack and Ace Queen on the turn. So then Ace 10 is his best hand. He never has a Queen, and he might just decide that he has to call because of that. So I mean, I'm just trying to get inside his head, but
yeah, it totally makes sense. One of the things I like about betting King Queen more than Queen Jack is you cut in half the combos of kings your opponent can have. And also, you're going to chop with King Queen, whereas with a hand like Queen Jack, you obviously lose to it. So I think it could be a pretty reasonable spot to check with a hand like Queen Jack or Queen 10 in his spot, but be betting with a hand like King Queen.
Yeah, I like the bet with King Queen. I just have seen so many checks in that spot that I think that his logic might be that this is the best hand he has, but maybe he was thinking about the blockers too. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Or maybe just Doug's bluffing too much. All right, let's move on to the next hand here. Ace 4 suited. I didn't look at the buy-in, but in general, these are probably going to be higher stakes tournaments, I imagine. I'm not playing the Big 22 too much in general. But here, this has to be like some coup main, I think, because we are like inf deep.
Yeah.
All right, so in line with the overall theme of the video, of course, we're talking about earlier spots in tournaments. We open it up on like approximately a quadrillion big blinds, and we face a button through. And this is actually a really interesting pre-flop decision. I looked through at this. I thought this was pretty interesting. Big blind cold calls the 3-bet.
Interesting.
Back to us. How do you feel here about your options? I mean, obviously fold's not on the table, but what do you think past that?
I like calling here when we're so deep early in a tournament. Like a hand like this can just make the nuts, which is really sweet. And there's definitely a value in 4-betting because the big blind kind of like squeezes the 3-better in the sense that he has to be worried about the guy behind him. And this is a hand that we would often 4-bet, but I prefer in these deep stack situations, like not making hands like the suited aces and stuff like that. I kind of just tend to prefer flatting and just try to play like a big pot here when we make our flush or a straight or maybe even a 2-pair. I definitely see some merit for 4-betting, but I definitely really like the flat here. And just, a lot, we're going to lose on some more like some boards, but I think just the possibility of trying to stack someone for 50K is pretty nice here.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple things at play. I mean, call obviously is printing. We need 17% equity, and we have suited ace. Kind of hard to not get 17%. I will say, though, I think that when we see the small button 3-bet and then big blind cold flat, I think the big blind almost never really has a hand that it wants to play against 4-bet because I just think that he's not going to take this line with hands like aces and kings.
Right.
If you have aces or kings, you're not like, all right, let's take a real cheap 3-way flop. You're trying to isolate the button or build a pot or whatever. So
yeah, he probably has like a lot of like 9s through queens and like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, hands like that.
Whenever I see this cold call pre-flop, I tend to put my opponent on like nines and like ace queen suited. That's like those are like the hands that I really tend to put them on. But
I think those queens, jacks, tens are in there a lot as well.
yeah, but I mean with queens, like with this action, I mean, are you not happy to just 4-bet this? Like I feel like
I am, but I think most people are flatting. But
maybe
because they're like, oh, what if I get 5-bet and like I don't want to like the way you have like way so many tournament players think about these spots is like you can only put in the nth bet if it's clear you're folding or getting it in. So like a hand like ace jack, they would like 4-bet ace jack off and call queens here because ace jack off is like a clear bluffing hand, and queens they're not really sure what happens if another bet goes in. So then like there's so many interesting spots in tournaments I think early when people have these sort of weird 3-bet and 4-bet ranges where they'll flat like kings or queens like early versus early, and then they'll 3-bet like a jack 8 suited or a jack 9 suited, and they just end up being like super bluffy or have super weird ranges. And I think you definitely can't rule out queens here.
All right.
And definitely.
Okay. Noted. So maybe a few hands that could call the 4-bet then.
Yeah, but not a ton, but yeah.
I still think in general this is a fairly weak hand. And then, so from a 4-betting perspective, looks good. Button 3-bet range, obviously probably pretty wide, pretty loose. Definitely can contain all the good hands, but I think in general people use this size 3-bet. They're kind of saying, hey, I'm going to go with a pretty aggressive range here. I'm going to try and isolate you, and we're deep. So I definitely think this is a good spot to 4-bet, good spot to flat. I guess the real question becomes if we're not going to use a hand like ace 4 of diamonds as a bluff, what hand are you looking to select to balance out your 4-bet range here? Like, what does your 4-bet range here pretty about kind of look like?
I would think ace jack off would be the first hand that really comes into mind. It can flop some decent pairs, but it's not, especially this deep, it doesn't have too many boards it makes the nuts on. Or like, a lot of situations are going to have like an okay top pair when it has an ace, when he has a lot of ace queen, ace king, and it can be in some dicey spots. So I think a hand like ace jack off, which has some removal effects and then also doesn't play as well post flop as an ace 4 suited, would be probably the first hand I go for.
Okay, that's reasonable. And apparently I agree with you. So we're going to take a flop here. There's certainly some chance I think that I was like randomizing and came across a call, but
for sure. Yeah.
All right, so we take a flop. Jack 5 deuce rainbow, check. Button half pot bet, call. And I think we actually have another interesting spot here. So what are your thoughts here? I can really see some merit for, again, anything except fold.
I definitely like check raising here a lot, to be honest. Like, we have all the sets. Like, I think it's the big blind could have jacks and the cutoff could have jacks, but other than that, like, we have jacks, fives, and deuces. And this seems like one of the first candidates that we would want to start bluff raising with to go along with some of those value raises. I think jacks we probably just call because it's just such a strong hand, but fives and deuces I would definitely think about raising. And I think this hand makes a lot of sense as a bluff. Like this hand with the backdoor flush draw and the gut shot, it definitely can barrel on so many turns and rivers and just has a lot of outs. And we can really put these guys in a really tough spot when there's so, especially this deep where kings and aces are really not going to be comfortable calling down for so many chips versus our range, which has a lot of good hands in it. So I definitely like the check raise here a lot. I mean, I don't think check calling is bad, obviously. Like, as long as you don't fold in the spot, you're fine. But I definitely like the check raise.
Okay, so we're looking at something around like 6-ish combos for value. How are you allocating your bluff range, given that we have a caller? Because if this was a heads up pot, obviously we would want to be continuing a bit looser. We'd probably looking to continue with hands like 8s or 9s. How are you changing your call range? How are you changing your raise range? What is FAPK2212? Whatever he's doing here, how is that changing what your strategy is?
I'm definitely continuing a lot tighter with my calls. So like you said, I'm folding 8s through 10s, which I would be always calling versus just one person. I'm also floating a lot less. Like, I think if this was a heads up pot, like floating ace queen, ace king, or ace king, if we didn't 4-bet it with our backdoor flush draws, would make a lot of sense. Even just 7-6 with the backdoor flush draw, 3 to a straight, 3 to a flush type hand. I would definitely be like considering floating those hands, and those are just snap folds now. I think I'm still calling any jack, whether it was heads up or three ways, but it does definitely affect it a little bit because, you know, we are worried about the guy, especially considering it's not just it's a three-way pot, it's a three-way three-bet pot, so he has a much stronger range to begin with. So I think, you know, it's even like with a hand like Jack Nine suited, we're not loving it. We're obviously going to call, but it's not, you know, just like, oh, slam dunk, let's make our decision on the river, where you're not even considering what could happen on the turn.
Okay, that seems pretty fair. I am still putting Fap K on nines here, even if you want to think he can have queens. But
Yeah,
anyway,
definitely.
I think in retrospect, I really do like a raise. I think I am going for the call here. I think my logic might have been I had some other hands that I wanted to bluff with. You know, maybe I was looking to raise some more ace threes. Maybe I was only going to use part of my ace fours. Maybe I wanted to use some hands like king, queen of hearts. I'm not, you know, not entirely sure. Again, hand from a while ago, but I like the raise in retrospect, I think.
Cool.
Okay, so interesting turn. Checks, button bets. Okay, so the story that the button is saying here is kind of interesting now because,
Yeah.
you know, I guess it does come down to a little bit to like how is he going to play some ace X hands on the flop? How is he going to play some ace king, some ace queens?
Right.
But I do think on the flop his main value hand he's representing are hands like king queen, sorry kings or queens. Or maybe a hand like ace jack, which obviously still, you know, makes some sense here, or makes sense here. So we're facing this bet. How are you playing your range here facing this spot?
I don't think I would, if I didn't raise the flop, I don't think I would be raising the turn here. I think I'm mostly playing out of a call range. I mean, we have a few ace X like this if we didn't raise them on the flop to call. I definitely would continue with some percentage of Jack X on the turn. I think I'm folding my worst Jack X just because it's not a great spot. Like, I think a Jack 9 suited or a Jack 10 suited, when he starts betting into two people on the turn, can definitely be go ahead and folded. We might have some backdoor flush draws as well, which is nice. But, you know, those are like pretty rare combos. But I don't think I would be check raising the turn here that much.
Yeah, I don't like a check raise. It is also worth talking about that you don't have to defend as much when someone bets into two people.
For sure, yeah.
Like, you know, if this was like, let's just say that Fap K folded on the flop. Well, then we could have continued with a bunch of pairs. And then when we get this turn, you know, we could certainly fold a lot of those, but we probably have to call any jack. But when he bets into two people, you can certainly look to fold some jacks. And I think there is, you know, not a huge difference amongst them, whether it's Jack 9 suited or a hand like King Jack, but there still is a difference. You know, if you have King Jack, you're more likely to block a hand like Ace King. It could be going bet. You have a little more removal against a hand like maybe Kings that's looking to go bet check. You know, I'm not saying that I think that's super likely here on the flop or here on the turn, but another hand that is possible. And also, you know, when you have a hand like Jack 10 or Jack 9, I feel like those could be cards your opponent can consider bluffing with. So a little bit of a difference amongst the jacks, and I do think you can let some of them go here on the turn.
For sure.
All right, so we go ahead and check call. Pretty clear spot with ace four. We get a very difficult to navigate river here. The three ball check and bet. So obviously we are going to go all in. In fact, I can just go ahead and put us all in. My question to you here is, first off, what hands are you going to be calling with facing this bet? And then second off, what hands would you consider looking to bluff jam here with?
This is an interesting spot, for sure. I think because this isn't a spot where we should have a lot of ace X. So, you know, we might have some ace queen and ace king maybe, but like it seems pretty unlikely given the flop action and pre-flop as well. I mean, I'm definitely calling with any of the two pairs or whatever I have. Those are the easy decisions, I think. Maybe even you could even make an argument for raising some of them, depending on if you think he's value betting ace queen or ace king on the river. Like raising ace jack or ace five definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm not very comfortable calling king jack here, given what's happened in this pot so far. I don't think there's removal is like, this isn't a spot where removal is really a thing for the check raise bluff. You know, it's not a spot like the nut flush where you want the blocker or something. Like, I don't think it really matters in this spot. So I think I would just pick the best hand I'm folding, and I'm having trouble coming up with like an ace that I would want to fold that would even be on the river like this. So I think that King Jack would be the first hand that really makes sense to me.
Yeah, so a few things. You definitely don't have to call any jacks. Like in general, I
Yeah.
would say if you check call a street where you need to fold some of a pair and call the rest,
You
the
fold those on the
the
next
rest
street.
of those, yeah, like almost never have to be river calls. You can almost
Yeah.
always find enough calls within the rest of your range. Um, you will certainly have a hand like jacks here
Hmm.
that you can jam. So you're gonna have jacks.
Yeah.
You're gonna have ace four suited. So I think fold Jack X, call. Yeah, again, weird if you have ace X or not.
Yeah.
But
There's not very many combos of them, to be honest.
well, you don't really have that many combos of much here. Like given
Yeah,
like
yeah, it's a
this,
really narrow range spot.
it is a narrow range spot. So I would say that I would not like to bluff with a hand that contains a spade.
Yeah.
I think that if you have a hand like King Jack with King of Spades, I would not like bluffing with that. Because that's certainly a card you would like your opponent to have. Um, and yeah, you're really not gonna have an ace here. So I think this is something like call two pair. I think even ace jack is probably a little too thin. I mean, I don't know if that's too nitty or not, but you have to beat over half the calls, right? And like your opponent's for sure gonna have aces, for sure gonna play jacks like this. Maybe they check the flop sometime, but are mainly gonna have jacks here. And then they could have a hand like 4-3 suited.
Yeah.
4-3 suited makes sense for sure. Or maybe like a 6-4 spades kind of hand, or maybe like a 6-4 of just like I'm gonna go for it kind of hand.
Yeah, for sure. They could definitely have some of those hands.
So I think I think a trapped set is kind of about the lowest I'm going for value,
Mhm.
which means that we have like something along the lines of you know a couple combos of ace four suited, and a few combos of jacks. So we can only really bluff with like one or two combos here. So you have to be kind of specific.
Hmm.
And I think generally in those spots, if we cannot really have an ace, like if all of our aces are two pair, then
Yeah.
I think it kind of has to be our best jack, which is king jack.
Yeah.
But even then, just not to get like too carried away with the removal. I know that a lot of people are like, man, these guys really care what their kicker is. But there is some part of me that like if you're playing against someone that will value it thinly, it's kind of like
You mean betting ace king is where
yeah,
you're
if they're gonna go for ace. But you know what, man, come on, ace king here is too thin.
Yeah, I
It,
don't betting ace king here at three streets is pretty
they'd
ridiculous.
have to be
But
from like Scandinavia or something for me to consider that they're betting ace king.
Ismail doesn't seem like a Scandinavian name.
Does
So
not. Does not seem like a scan. And the 3-7s and 3-8s doesn't lead me to believe it either. So
I feel like he's just gonna have two pair and we're just gonna stack him. That's what I'm hoping for.
so we jam and two pair and we stack him. So you're right in the money. So let's go ahead and jump into one of your hands then.
Okay, cool.
Let's just jump right into it. So we have King Jack in the small blind. We are going to face a hijack min raise. Folds to us. And before we even take a look at what you do here, pretty flop, what are your thoughts here as far as how you're going to play this hand versus the open?
I think this is a pretty interesting spot. The opener is a good reg, and the big blind is also a very good reg. And so I assume this is from a tougher tournament. And I think hands like King Jack can be quite interesting in the small blind. I think a lot of people sort of tend to play three better fold from here. I think that sort of limits our options because we kind of have to play too tight of a range. I think a hand like King Jack, when we know the big blind is going to overcall a lot, can definitely make sense to flat. We dominate some of the opening range, and I think three betting this hand is definitely okay. Like I think I prefer it to folding, but I think especially versus a min raise with annies, we're just getting such a good price that I think like going ahead and flatting is definitely reasonable. I think it's close though. I can hear some arguments for three betting. I'd like to hear what you think about this spot.
I think in general, I'm playing three better fold here. One of the
Mhm.
spots that I have struggled with the most in Ring has been the small blind.
Yeah.
I've always found that I have had really good results compared to the field in both the big blind and the button when playing Ring. But I tend to be much worse than most players in the small blind. So that usually makes me lean towards being a little bit tighter and playing more my range out of a re-raise. But,
Yeah.
when you're playing in a tournament and you're facing a min raise, it's like such a different animal than when,
Yeah.
you're in a cash game. Like in the upswing lab, we talk about not having a flat range here at all, right?
Right.
But, if you're facing a 3x and, you're in the small blind, there's rake and there's no ante, then yeah, no flat range is fine. I mean, maybe there's a couple hands that could make sense, but in general, not calling there is fine. But when there's going to be no rake, because, obviously rake is taken when you enter and not per hand, and then there is an ante, and then you have the big blind as well, or rather, I mean, the big blind's likely to call, I guess, as well. You're getting a relatively attractive spot to flat, so I would probably 3-bet or fold, but I could certainly see, some logic towards calling.
Yeah, I think especially with both these players being very good players, I think there's way more of an argument to 3-bet or fold, taking that strategy, than in a softer tournament where it was like maybe a mediocre big blind and a mediocre opener, where I think, we can just not worry about having those split ranges or whatever. So I definitely see the merit. And, my first instinct was like, okay, I should 3-bet. And then I started getting talked into it because, there's a small price. There's such a good price when he min raises and there's antes. But I definitely think you can go either way. If you're gonna have a 3-bet or fold strategy, I think this is a fine hand to 3-bet.
All right, so we call. Big blind calls. Jack 9-4 rainbow, definitely one of the better flops you can ask for. And we face a super small bet here from, well, I mean, I guess it's not super. It's a relatively small bet here on the flop.
I think this is like a standard tournament bet.
Well, it's around 35-ish% pot or whatever.
Yeah.
So definitely a bet on the smaller side. I cannot see much merit here for anything other than call.
Yep. I think this is totally standard.
I mean, one of the advantages to raise could be knocking the big blind out, but then what are you doing on later streets? How's this going? So, yeah, I definitely like a call here.
Yeah.
Big blind folds.
This is definitely a fun spot if you're the big blind to attack pretty aggressively when we're kind of, you kind of really put the small blind in a lot of tough spots.
Are you talking about check raising the flop?
If you're the big blind, this is like once it goes bet call, I think this is a spot you can definitely attack because the hijack might be just betting the whatever, and the small blind kind of has like, it's hard for him to have too many great hands. So it's definitely a spot I think you can attack with some like hands that have good equity to barrel and stuff like that.
I definitely agree with that, but I also think that when small blinds call, their hands tend to be, Broadway type hands, and then pairs. I think. I think that the small blind. One of the problems with the small blind flat range is how specific it ends up being. So
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the
I was gonna say that's
here. I'll talk first. So one of the problems with that is when the small blind does call a bet on Jack 9-4. I'm anticipating that means that they're going to have a lot of hands that actually play pretty well against the raise. I mean, I'm not saying that I think the small blind has like a ton of really strong hands. I don't think they do. But the small blind definitely going to have ace jack, king jack, maybe just king jack suited, queen jack suited, jack 10 suited. And then occasionally hands like 9s and 4s or a hand like queen 10 that can continue as well, queen 10 suited. So I think it might be a spot where on maybe some boards that are a little lower, I think that's true. Maybe a board kind of more like...
Yeah.
Maybe more like 9-7-4 or 9-7-5, where the big blind has a bunch of hands that the small blind doesn't. But I don't think that on this board it's too great of a spot for the big blind. Certainly you're going to want to make at least a few moves, but I don't know if I agree that it's a great board for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of where it kind of capped to one pair. So maybe we're not deep enough, but I think if we're deeper, you can kind of like attack it and base it on the runouts later. But yeah, obviously we definitely have some okay hands here, but it's pretty rare that we're like really strong, and that just sort of shows the problem with the cap small blind range, like you were saying. Especially like even ignoring the big blind, the hijack should have a pretty good idea of what types of hands we have, which makes like playing later streets a lot more difficult when you sort of have a face up range.
Okay, that makes sense to me. But the big blind decides to fold, and we take a turn, check, and. What do you think about our opponent's bet size here? What do you think that he's kind of repping with this bet, and how are you planning on playing your ranger in the small one?
I mean, this is just such a weird, like, small to big. Like, the weird thing is the six doesn't interact at all with this board. So usually when a tournament player does this sort of thing where they bet really small on the flop and then suddenly start bombing out of nowhere on the turn of the river, it generally means that they somehow hit the card, even though it makes no sense for them to have hit the card. But I think with this six, that's not really something we can really consider. I mean, he could have Jack six suited or something, but that's such a rare thing. I think it's definitely he could have turned a lot of like flush draws and stuff, where he was, for bluffs that he's like, kind of just bet the flop to try to take it down. And now that he's like got a draw, he wants to try to start putting a lot of pressure on our Jack tens, our 9/8s, our weaker hands. And he's decided that, okay, it's time to barrel. I think the sizing makes a lot of sense from a theoretical perspective. Like if he's going to keep betting, like, he's kind of repping a strong range. And we sort of have a face-up range of, mediocre one pairs. But I think when a tournament player does this, you should definitely notice it, because him not betting like 900 to 1200 here is definitely a very notable sizing, and it changes the way his range interacts with the card for sure, I think.
So do you think he's turned a draw here a lot then, is kind of what I feel like you're getting at?
Yeah, I think it's more likely that he has that. And he could also have like some good hands. Maybe he just bet the nines on small on the flop, and now it's just like, okay, I guess suckered the guy in, let's just start bombing it. But it's just something you should always pay attention to if people who aren't playing super theoretical based, if they start making a weird sizing out of nowhere on a certain card, it's likely their range interacts with the card very well, or in a strange way that even if you can't like totally predict it, it just tends to happen.
Right. Okay. So like if someone bet like kind of normal on a flush draw flop, turn completed the flush, and they bomb it, they probably don't have a set.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna try to sucker you in with the little half pot to 2/3 pot bet,
All right. So we do face a larger bet here. I mean, I can't imagine anything but call.
Yeah.
All right. So we go ahead and flat. Setting up kind of an interesting pot to stack ratio on the river, about 2x pot behind. And check, and we face a 4,700 chip bet. Very large bet here on the river.
Yeah. This is, I think this is a very tough spot, actually. I mean, we have some better hands. We have like nines and fours, Jack nine suited, Queen Jack suited, Ace Jack. I think this hand, given the line that's happened, I think it's definitely reasonable to fold. We could have even floated some hands like King Queen or Queen 10 on the turn. And I think this hand is basically towards the bottom of our range. So I think it has some nice blocker properties, and it blocks like a King 10, for example. But I think having the King of Clubs here and just, I think just not being super high up in our range means this is probably better as a fold. And given the sizings and stuff, I think this is definitely a hand that I would like to see folded. I know what happens, but yeah, I think that's just my looking at it now. That's how I would think about the spot.
Well, there are a few things that stick out to me. For starters, I think King Jack is a better hand than Ace Jack here, because you block King 10.
Yeah, that's what I thought on the spot. I remember that.
Yeah, so I think King Jack is a stronger call than Ace Jack. So between the two, I would like to call that first. I think Jack 10 suited is a stronger call than either, because really when he bets this large on the turn, this big in the river, I don't think that this is really a one pair hand. I think we're looking at kind of two pair plus here.
Right.
So having a 10, a nice card to have, because it's not really that many hands that could have a 10 that are bluffing, unless maybe a 10-7 really loose hijack open, or an ace 10 of like clubs or something. But in general, I think Jack 10 of the jacks is the strongest jack to call here. So
yep.
I would say that I think having a club in your hand makes this a fold. Of the jacks I can have, I feel like having the kicker that is a club isn't very good. The king of clubs doesn't really change too much. Like I think ace jack with the ace of clubs would be like a pretty terrible call.
Right. Yeah.
Because hands like the nut flush draw, there's a lot of those that could go open pre bet, or bet rather. I think king jack with the king of clubs, you are only really blocking ace king suited, or maybe like a loose ish king 8, king 7 of clubs open, which in tournaments can happen. There can be a loose open that You know, if you haven't
Yeah.
opened in a while and you want to make a move. So I think that those things make me lean a little bit more towards a fold here. I think actually even with Jack 10, I mean, yeah, like, you know, if you're going to be trapping your range on the flop, and you're just going to be caller folding, then you can certainly have some sets. You can certainly have Queen Jack. You know, maybe you could have a hand like King 10 of clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could have a hand like Queen 10. So,
Yes.
I mean, maybe you don't even have to really call Jack X here. You know, certainly not
You could
Jack
have
X with a
King
club.
of clubs as well, so that's like another thing.
Sorry, well, I couldn't hear you.
King Queen of clubs. That's like another hand we could have. So
Sure,
we have
yeah.
some. Yeah.
Although only one combo, and I might think about that pre. Although, kind of depends on the way you're trying to play the stack size. So, yeah, I think I like letting it go.
Yeah, I did not let it go. I think having the king, I decided that was a better call, but I still, looking back in retrospect, I think it's a bad call.
Well, the king is better than the ace, but I think the king of clubs is worse.
I agree.
Yeah, your reads were on. The 6 was him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just very funny. You should always pay attention to those kinds of things in tournaments, because even though I think from a theoretical perspective, it makes sense for him just to start bombing with his value range and some bluffs, like people are betting like 1,200 if they have ace jack on the turn there. So it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I think it's fine to have two bet sizes, especially when you have a hand like, you know, a jack. You block so many of the calls. You kind of have to go with a smaller size, if you're gonna split. But yeah, I mean, if people, you know, really the first thing that sticks out to me when you see that splitting is, you know, look to start check raising them a little more aggressively when they go for the small size, because, you know, if you're going to go with the smaller size thin value bets, which, you know, if you're going to split, you should, then you're going to have to call down more aggressively, given the fact that your range doesn't have a lot of those really strong hands.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for joining us today on the channel. This was going to be a 20-minute video. We went a little bit long, but I think we got through some good information. And I want to welcome you to the Upswing team.
Yeah, glad to be here.
If you guys are interested in learning more about tournaments from Pratyush, with a little bit of me sprinkled in there as well, we are going to be releasing the Tournament Master Class on May 22nd for $700. I do understand that's going to be too much money for a lot of you guys, so if you want your game to get better for free, we're going to release a few more videos like this, walking you through some hand histories at different stages in the tournament. So if you want to get better, the link is in the description below. You don't have to spend any money, and you can still get some good information to help your game. So thank you again, everyone, for stopping by, and I'll see you again soon.